The dust rolled in like an old sin, quiet, persistent, and heavy with judgment. It clung to boots, to breath, to memory. By midday, the square of Dusthaven buzzed with the low murmurs of commerce and curiosity, as if the town itself leaned forward to witness the spectacle unfolding atop the old auction block. She stood there, barefoot, pale arms roped behind her like some stubborn colt. Her hair was the color of sun-bleached straw, wild from wind and shame. The girl couldn't have been more than 17. She wore a faded calico dress 2 sizes too big, cinched with twine, and though her lips were cracked, her chin did not tremble. That refusal to bow, even under the eye of her buyers, made something shift in the crowd's breath. Silas Boone watched from the shadow of the livery overhang, a half-forged bridle in his hand, forgotten. His knuckles, gnarled with time and regrets, flexed around the iron. It had been years since he stood among people. Years since Ellen's grave had grown weeds she'd have hated. But the sharp line of the girl's jaw, the defiance in her silence, it stirred a splinter he thought long buried. "She's a quiet one," barked Jedediah Crow, the auctioneer, voice too chipper for the occasion. "Strong back. No complaints. Just a bit spirited." The crowd chuckled. Men with sun-leathered faces and greedy eyes weighed her with the same gaze they'd give a mule. Miss Temperance Rowe, hands folded over her parasol, muttered to the woman beside her, "They say she tried to run. Twice. Stubborn as a jackrabbit." A voice rang out like a spurred whip. $2. Heads turned. Clayton Briggs, tall, mean-shouldered, and known for bruising what he bought, stood with a grin twisted across his face. His boots were polished, his money loud. "Ain't no one gonna bid higher," he drawled. "She's barely worth that." The girl flinched, just slightly, but her eyes stayed locked ahead. Her wrists, already reddened from the binding rope, twitched. Jed cleared his throat, waited. No one else spoke. "Sold, then." The slap came out of nowhere. Clayton had climbed the steps, grabbed her by the arm, and when she didn't move fast enough, he struck her. The sound cracked through the summer air like a whip, silencing the birds. No one intervened. Not a gasp. Not a shuffle. Just a settling of eyes into the ground. Except one. Silas dropped the bridle. It hit the dirt with a dull thud. His cane thumped once as he stepped forward, slow but steady. He had once been the law here. A lifetime ago, before grief hollowed him out. He'd not spoken above a whisper in 5 years. But his voice, when it came, was iron wrapped in velvet. "That hand of yours," he said, "doesn't strike again. Not while I draw breath." Clayton turned, blinking, then smirked. Didn't know ghosts could talk. Silas stepped closer, his limp evident, but his stare unbroken. "Bid's not closed. I'll pay for." The crowd shifted, confused. Jed sputtered, you sure, Mr. Boone?" Silas nodded once. "She's not for breaking. She's for breathing." Clayton's face darkened. "She ain't yours to rescue, old man." Silas pulled from his pocket a rusted, time-worn object. The old sheriff's badge caught the sun just enough to hush even the snickers. "Wasn't asking," he said. Jed looked between them, then muttered, $4. Final call." A gavel cracked. "Sold." The rope came off. Clayton spat in the dirt and stalked away. Silas didn't watch him go. His attention remained on the girl. She rubbed her wrists, wary as a cornered dog. "I don't need Savon," she said hoarsely. "Didn't say you did." She stared at him, unsure whether that made it better or worse. The walk back to Silas's homestead was wordless. The wind kicked dust up behind them like memory trying to catch their heels. The forge sat just beyond the edge of town, leaning into a hillside, tucked in the belly of mesquite and stone. Smoke curled from the chimney like it, too, had grown tired of being lonely. Inside, the air smelled of coal and iron and something strangely comforting, solitude earned, not suffered. He motioned to the cot in the loft. "That's yours, if you want it." She didn't thank him. Didn't need to. He didn't ask her name. Not yet. He handed her a cup of water and half a loaf of bread. That night, they sat across from each other, 2 ghosts lit by firelight. She mended a ripped hem in silence. He polished the same horseshoe 3 times over. Outside, a coyote called once, then was still. When he finally looked up, her eyes met his, not soft, but not angry. Just tired. Like someone who had run for a very long time and was still deciding whether this place was safe to rest. He nodded once, as if to say same here. In the square the next morning, the whispers began. Miss Temperance passed judgment with her tea. Took her in, they say. The old Boone shack. Poor thing. Don't know what's worse, belonging to Clayton or being a stray in that house. The baker's wife scoffed, no proper girl stays with a widower. There'll be talk. And there was. Plenty of it. But the girl with straw in her hair didn't seem to hear. She scrubbed the forge floor, fetched water, mended what she could find. Silas said little, but noticed everything, the way she took her meals standing, as if unsure she was allowed to sit. The way she flinched when boots sounded behind her. The way her hands shook when she thought no one watched. On the third night, he found her staring at the coals long after supper. He placed a folded blanket by her elbow. She whispered then, low as wind through broken fence slats. "I'm Lila." Silas Boone didn't smile, but his voice carried warmth it hadn't known in years. "Figured you had a name." And in that quiet space between fire crackle and breathing, something shifted. Not salvation. Not romance. Just the first fragile thread of belonging. Tomorrow, the town would murmur louder. But for tonight, the forge was warm, the girl was safe, and Silas Boone, ghost though he'd become, felt something almost like living again. The morning sun bled through the slats of the forge like a quiet warning. Lila stirred early, as she always did now, folding the blanket Silas had given her and setting a pot of water to boil. She moved with the certainty of someone who knew the rhythm of silence, who had learned that usefulness was safer than gratitude. Outside, birds argued in the mesquite, and the wind tasted of coming change. Silas sat on the porch sharpening a plow blade, watching the horizon with the eyes of a man who'd seen too much arrive from its edge. He didn't speak as she stepped onto the porch with a chipped cup of coffee, just held it in his palm like it was the first warmth of the day. She sat beside him without asking. "He's still here," she said after a while. Silas didn't need to ask who. Clayton Briggs hadn't left town. The man had been seen at the saloon 3 nights running, liquor loud in his mouth, pride bleeding from his eyes. Men like that didn't take humiliation kindly, especially not when delivered in front of half the town by a quiet girl and a has-been blacksmith. "He'll try something," Lila murmured, her voice steady but low. "He can't stand feeling smaller than someone like me." Silas didn't look at her, just nodded. "That's the sickness in men like him. Ain't got no cure but consequence." A quiet passed between them, not fear, not yet, but the kind of tension that hung in the air before a storm. Lila stood, wiped her palms on her dress, and went back inside. She didn't want protection. She wanted a plan. The town didn't forget what had happened on the auction block, but it didn't quite remember it right either. Rumor twisted things, softening edges, reassigning blame. Some said Silas only acted out of pity. Others whispered darker reasons. Miss Temperance told anyone who'd listen that girl's got a spell on him. But the baker's boy, who had watched Lila sweep the steps of the forge in the heat of day, simply said, "She's got dignity." And in a town like Dusthaven, that was rarer than gold. 2 days later, it happened. Lila had gone to the general store for flour and thread. She wore her old boots now, the ones Silas had helped patch. Her hair was brushed and tied back with a strip of cloth. She walked with her head high, not out of pride, but practice. It was almost noon when Clayton followed her in. No one saw the first moment, only the sound of her startled gasp, the clatter of dropped goods, and the sharp edge in his voice. "You think you're too good for what you were bought for?" he sneered. Lila stood her ground, spine straight, one hand behind her gripping a can of beans like a weapon. "I think," she said quietly, "you've mistaken silence for weakness." Clayton laughed, short and bitter, and reached for her. The door slammed open behind him. Silas Boone walked in like a slow fire. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply crossed the floor with the limp that made each step sound heavier than it should. "Let her go, Briggs." Clayton turned, lip curling. "Still playing her savior, Boone? She ain't yours." Silas's eyes didn't waver. "You're right. She ain't mine. She's hers. And you're gonna leave her be." Clayton snarled and swung. It wasn't a clean punch, not even close. Years of forging had slowed Silas, and his bad leg gave way as he tried to sidestep. He hit the floor hard, breath knocked from his lungs. Clayton stepped over him, hand reaching again for Lila. This time, she didn't wait. She swung the can of beans with both hands, catching him just beneath the ear. It wasn't elegant, but it was enough. He staggered back, more shocked than hurt. The store had gone death still. Even the grocer behind the counter froze with a box of crackers in hand. Lila stood there, chest heaving, can still in her grip. Miss Temperance was the first to speak. She stepped through the open door, her voice sharp as a church bell. "That's enough." Clayton blinked, dazed. "She's not property," Temperance said firmly, looking at the others. "And neither is he." All at once, others began to shift. Jed Crow stepped forward, hat in hand, regret in his eyes. "I should have never sold her," he said quietly. "I knew better." Clayton looked around, seeing not just Lila and Silas, but an entire town suddenly unwilling to play its old role. He stumbled back, swearing under his breath, and stormed out, leaving behind a silence too full to ignore. Lila dropped the can, her arms finally shaking. Silas rose slowly, touching his ribs with a wince. "You didn't need saving," he said softly, almost smiling. "No," she whispered, helping him up. "But you reminded me I was worth it." They walked back to the forge under a sky beginning to soften with the coming dusk. That night, Lila sat by the fire with a notebook in her lap, scribbling words only she would read. Silas handed her something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it carefully, ****, a horseshoe ****, reshaped, polished. On the inner curve, one word was etched in his rough hand, free. She didn't say thank you. He didn't ask for it. The fire crackled between them, the kind of warmth that didn't ask permission. Outside, the stars came slow and patient, blinking into the quiet like watchful old souls. In Dusthaven, people talked less about what had happened and more about how they felt when it did. They said the air had changed. That something cruel had been dragged into the light and left there, unwelcomed. Lila never stopped working. Silas never asked her to stay. But day after day, they built something out of silence, kindness, and small shared meals, something that looked a lot like home. And though no one called it love, it wrapped around them just the same.